Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I want to show you the full tutorial of how I paint my watercolor kitties. I've had a lot of requests to do a full tutorial, and I've had some frequently asked questions about what do I use to mask off the eyes and things like that, so just figured we'd start. So here I'm just starting out with the web string, and I've gone over with a little bit of pink watercolor pencil just to kind of map out where in the center of the canvas I'm going to put the spider, just to get it figured out early on so I don't paint off the canvas like I usually do. It's kind of decentered. So now I'm just drawing bits of the web just with a regular pencil because I don't need to be able to wash it off. So I'm just sketching the basic shape of the spider cat. I want it to have kind of curvy, soft legs at the end and not pointy, because pointy legs kind of look like a scary spider, and round legs make it look better. I'm just going over and refining how I want the web to look and how I want the spider to look. So now I'm just kind of roughly placing where I think the eyes should be. I always like to put them pretty low on the face because that makes it more cute looking. And then drawing in where the ears are, and of course the little mouth and the blep. It's got to have a blep on this one too, especially. So I'm just kind of getting a sense of where I want it to be, and now I use this protractor to really make sure the eyes are completely round. I find it looks cuter if the eyes are completely round and not kind of misshapen. I can't really trust myself to make perfect circles, so I just map it out really nicely with a protractor. I think that's what it's called, a protractor. Oh, and this is also how I map out the pupils. I've been doing that a little more lately. So I go a little bit to the side of the hole where I made the eyes to make a little inner crescent circle so that I can paint the pupils there. And again, not have to freehand the eyes or the pupils, so I can make it look really how I want it to. Right? And just refining the shape of the mouth and the little blep tongue. And I'm also drawing over with regular pencil on the ears, because when you wash regular pencil with water, the pencil never goes away. But with watercolor pencils, it goes away. So I'm using Misket Liquid Frisket. This is the brand I use to mask the eyes off. You can find it at Michael's, but it's basically a liquid rubber. And that's what I use to cover the eyes with so that the paint I make all over the body doesn't get on the eyes. And first, I use my brush to just wipe a little bit of it. It's mostly dry, but a little damp. And I get a little layer of soap all over the paintbrush. And that's to protect the paintbrush from getting the liquid rubber stuck to it, basically. So now I'm just dipping it and swirling around, and then being very precise about where I paint in around the outer corner of the eye. Just making really sure I do it nice and round and I don't go outside the lines. And then I go in with another layer just to make sure it's nice and thick so it peels off more easily. And for some reason this time around I've got a lot of bubbles on the liquid frisket. That usually never happens, but this was a weird shoot today for some reason. So I'm just going over very carefully and precisely with the other eye and giving that a nice layer as well. Just very carefully and gently, and trying to get those bubbles popped. Oops, it kind of got blown outside the line, but that's okay, I can fix that later. So now I'm painting in the little tongue so that that can be nice and blank for me to put a light pink color in. And as soon as possible, I dip the brush in some water to get rid of the liquid frisket, because you want to make sure you wash it fast so the liquid frisket doesn't get stuck to your nice paintbrush. So now I'm going with the hair dryer to dry off the masking fluid to make sure it's absolutely dry before I lay any water down or paint down. And at this part, I can kind of carefully peel it. I don't want to rip the whole thing off, but I'm kind of carefully going. And then I kind of push it in so then it's inside the outline. So it actually works out really well. If you go outside the lines, you can just kind of roll it back in and it'll stick to itself. So that's how I've done it whenever I've made a mistake like that. It can usually be fixed Now at this point, I'm kind of refining how I want the legs to look and making them look a little more symmetrical, a little more shapely and organic, and just feeling through the pose and seeing how I really want it to look, because I'm trying to think about it now. So I'm also like giving them a little more bend so it has a little bit of a more dynamic, appealing, and interesting pose. I'm always looking for ways to push it before I start painting it. So now that the drawing and masking off is done, now I'm going to start painting, and I'm using this nice dark black color. It's from this Winsor & Newton brand, Lamp Black. This is the best black paint I've tried because it's got a really strong pigment, so it'll go on really dark and be black instead of gray. So the most important part of the wet on wet fluffy technique is to just dump some water on the whole canvas, just spread it as a thin layer of water all over the canvas to just give it a thin wet coat. Really thin, not any puddles or anything like that, but just a nice thin little sheet of water on the canvas. So now I'm going in with a fairly wet paintbrush, because I want this to fluff out a lot, into that deep dark black, and really like getting it in there so I can saturate that water with the paint and get it as black as possible. And then I just start painting it in and following the outline that I've drawn before with the fluffy black paint. And of course the key to making it fluffy is to have a wetter paintbrush on the already wet paper. You don't want the paper to be really wet, like puddly, but you do want the paintbrush to be nice and wet for more fluffy effects. So I'm just painting the back legs that are pulling itself up on the spider string, and just painting in the legs. I mean, this is the most therapeutic part, brushing the fluffy, glidey paint onto the canvas. So it's looking very much like a fluffy tarantula right now. And I'm trying to go pretty fast because the canvas will start to dry, and if it dries too much, it will stop being fluffy when you paint it and start having a sharp line, and you definitely don't want that. Kind of putting in the ears. I know you can't see the ears very well now, but I'm going to lift off some paint so that you can see where the ears end and the legs begin. Now every once in a while there's some paint that escapes in a way that I don't really want it to, so I just get a clean, slightly damp brush and just lift it away and dot it on the paper towel so it stays dry, and that's how I can easily lift the paint off. So I'm just kind of going in and cleaning up around the back legs, making sure I define those little feeties between the string, and kind of going in again with the paint. I wouldn't advise this because it's kind of a mistake to try to go back once it started to dry too much, because again, you can kind of see that sharp line coming in. But now I'm lifting a little bit of paint away from the ears, so now you can really see the outline of the ears. So now it's more obvious that this is a cat with little cat ears. And I just keep lifting away paint so it's nice and light, so I get that good silhouette, and make the cute little inner ears. And that really comes across as a cat ear. Doesn't have to be realistic, but I do like to communicate clearly that it's a cat. Then I'm just going in, and I know this part is sharp, but I do have a little bit of a hack to make it fluffy again. I just get a little section of water right next to it, but not touching it yet. And then I get the paintbrush and kind of connect, and then it gets fluffy again. And that's how I can kind of spot treat where I made a little mistake. So I'm thoroughly drying the paint, and that's pretty much it for the body. So now I'm going and peeling the eyes. I'm carefully going with my finger and kind of peeling off the corner. And usually this should be able to peel off pretty easily, but this liquid biscuit was just acting weird today and I couldn't get a really thick bunch. And now I'm carefully pushing off this. I don't want to just rip it off in the direction away from it, because that might rip the paper. So I kind of peel it in the opposite direction so it doesn't lift up the watercolor paper with it. So now that the masking is gone, we can go ahead and do a nice green color for the eyes. I like to make the eyes kind of a yellowish green, and there's a little bit of white in that green pot, so I'm kind of mixing it with the yellow. So I'm kind of looking for the color I want, just adding a lot of water so that it's a nice thin layer and it doesn't cover over what I drew to indicate where the pupil starts and ends. So now I'm carefully going in with that nice green iris color. And I do like to just cover the whole eye. And as you see, I have been leaving it fairly watery so that I can still see that pupil line that I drew carefully. And I like to have more of the darker color concentrated on the bottom of the eyes and a little more pale, like highlights at the top. So it gives it a little more dimension of the eye. I'm just lifting off, and then I'm drying it completely with a hair dryer, and now I'm going in with the pupil color. And of course the pupils are going to be black, but I figured since I want it to be a little spooky, I might mix it with a little bit of red. I figured I'd try to make it a little like dark red maroonish and not just totally black, and see if I could add a little spice to the pupils. So now this is the part that's kind of the most tedious and the most stressful, which is making sure this pupil is really nice and circular and I don't cross over into the iris. So I'm just really touching that up, being very careful to make a nice round pupil, and sometimes I have to match up the mistakes so it at least looks more symmetrical. And then of course going in with the mouth just to make a cute little mouth shape to kind of frame the tongue. And I can always, on a black cat, it makes it easy to refine the shapes. So now I'm going in with just a little bit of alizarin crimson, just a really light layer with a lot of water. Not a lot of water, but light enough to be a light pink color for that little blep tongue. Now for the highlights, I go in with a heavy body acrylic white. I know it's technically not watercolor, but I use a lot of this white acrylic at the end for just the highlights of the eyes. So I've squeezed out a little dollop on the white canvas since it won't be visible anyway. So now I'm taking a paintbrush that I actually took scissors and cut so that it will be a perfectly flat circle, because I've been having a hard time painting the highlights to be the size I want and be perfectly round. I wish I had a paintbrush that could easily do that, but this is the method I've started to use to make it a little easier. Now I'm pushing it down confidently, and that looks fairly roundish. It's a good eye highlight. Just a simple, round, big white circle near the top corner. And then I usually like to add a smaller highlight around the bottom. So these lower highlights came out a little too big and they're competing with the top highlights, and I want them to be a little smaller. So I'm just going in with a clean, slightly damp brush to kind of wipe away a bit of the excess acrylic paint. And then if there's still a little bit of visible acrylic, I can go over it again with that dark, almost black pupil color. All right, so now I'm taking the excess acrylic I didn't use and kind of pushing it back into the acrylic bottle because I don't want to waste too much, and just rub the rest of it into the canvas. So that takes care of the acrylic I used, and then I can just wipe my finger into the bowl of water to clean it off. So now I'm going back in with that dark pupil paint and just cleaning up this acrylic I had to wipe to make the lower highlights smaller. That makes it look nice and clean, making sure it's very symmetrical. All right, and now I'm going in to add some whiskers. I use a little white watercolor pencil just to easily draw on some nice clean lines for the whiskers. As you can see, this watercolor pencil is super short because I've been using this for all of my cat paintings ever since like October of last year. So yeah, I've been using it to the end, and that's my finished little spider kitty. I hope you enjoyed watching this process and feel like painting your own kitties. And this spider kitty is available on my Etsy shop to buy, and that will be linked in my bio and in the description. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. All right, thanks. Bye.